Greetings, everyone. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 4, we find these interesting words. When Ahab got home, he told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, including the way he had killed all the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah: May the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you, just as you killed them. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. For just a few moments, when the going gets rough, there are times in all of our lives when we, like the prophet Elijah, want to throw our hands up and tell anyone who will listen, I've had enough. I'm through. Stick a fork in me because I'm done. Life can sometimes be very frustrating, especially when you have put forth your best efforts and you still can't seem to catch a break. It often seems that the harder you try, the farther behind you get. And like the prophet, you throw yourself a pity party. You would invite some of your friends, but many of them are just as messed up as you are. So there you are, surrounded by gloom and doom, with defeat knocking at your front door and your back door. What do you do? What do you do when the going gets rough? What do you do when there seems to be no way out? Notice, if you will, when it was that Elijah found himself on the run and down in the dumps. Elijah experienced the depth of fatigue and discouragement just after two great spiritual victories: the defeat of the 850 prophets of Baal and Asherah, and his answered prayer for rain. Elijah had prayed fire down from heaven on Mount Carmel, and then prayed rain down from the same skies to end a 3.5 year drought. In spite of all this, we find the prophet tired, afraid, depressed, and stressed out. Often discouragement sets in after great spiritual experiences, especially those requiring physical effort or involving great emotion. Too many of us make the same mistakes that Elijah made. First of all, we focus on our feelings rather than on the facts, as he did in verse 4. We compare ourselves to others, as he did in verse 4. And then we blame ourselves, as he did in verse 10, the first part. And then we exaggerate the negative, as he does in this last part of verse 10. Might I suggest doing what Elijah should have done? This is a lesson I'm still learning on my second 50 years toward 100. First of all, refresh yourself and take care of your physical needs. Elijah was physically tired, emotionally exhausted, and threatened with death. He was a perfect candidate for a breakdown. To lead him out of depression, God first let Elijah rest and eat. Twice the bone-riven man of God fell asleep and only be awakened by an angel with food and water. After rest and miraculous nourishment, Elijah was able to travel for 40 days and 40 nights into the Sinai desert as far as Mount Horeb, over 150 miles further south. Be careful now that you don't try to orchestrate the means and the methods of your renewal. God often works in mysterious and wonderful ways and doesn't always minister to us in the ways that we expect. Take care of yourself physically. Secondly, reflect lucidly about your present situation. Elijah was lonely, worried, angry, afraid, resentful, experiencing low self-esteem, guilt, and self-pity. When he reflected on his situation, he took it to the Lord. When Elijah ran, he ran to the right place. He ran to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. He ran to the arms of God. What do we do when we find ourselves where Elijah was? What do we do when our fears overtake our faith? What happens when, in fighting the good fight of faith, we seem always to be facing failure? What should we do? We should run to God. There at Mount Horeb, God spoke to Elijah. not in the night of earthquake, wind, and fire, but in the unusual gentleness, the comfort and communion of the still small voice. As Elijah felt God's presence in silence, he was able to express his fears and frustration. He cried out, "Enough is enough. I've had it. I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altar, and they're seeking to take my life. I'm alone here. I'm out here fighting this fight all by myself, and they're seeking to take my life, to take it away." Fear will make you feel like giving up sometimes. Sometimes you just get tired of fighting tigers, fighting on the job, fighting in a home, fighting in church, fighting haters and prognosticators, fighting within yourself, fighting pettiness and jealousy, fighting to make ends meet, fighting addictions, fighting the devil, and fighting your own fears. And we say with Elijah, enough is enough. I give up. Why try anymore? What saved Elijah was this. When he panicked and ran, he ran to the Lord. He didn't run to another unfulfilling and unrewarding relationship. He ran to God. He didn't run to another eating or drinking binge or shopping or spending spree. He ran to God. Don't you run to another episode where some person close to you is using you as a punching bag. You run to God. Don't stretch out on some couch up on the fifth floor in some plush office. You stretch out on God. Don't go to Sister So and so in the corner to have her to read your palm. You let God hold your hand. What saved Elijah was that when he said enough, he was talking to God, not to another human being, someone who was probably just as bad as he was in terms of that situation. He turned to God. Elijah went to God and he talked to God. You and I must do the same when the going gets rough. Finally, when the going gets rough, let God renew you. Elijah was instructed by God to anoint Hazael as king of Syria, anoint Jehu king of Israel, and anoint Elijah his successor. Elijah threw his iPhone and his iPad away and allowed God to order his steps. God comforted Elijah with the need to go back to his mission. That is, to go back and speak to God's people, using God's word, speak to God's people. Elijah's battles were not over. There was still work for him to do. God's purpose for his life was not over yet. Elijah needed to restore his faith in God, his faith in himself, and his faith in others. This experience in the wilderness addressed all three. God was still there, as powerful and as loving as ever. Elijah could still trust God. He could believe in himself because he was still important to God. There was work for him to do. Elijah's faith in others were renewed when God reminded him that he was not the only one in the battle. There was others. The prophets in the caves were with him. There was brave Obadiah. There was the multitude who proclaimed their renewed faith at Mount Carmel. And there were the 7,000 others who remained faithful to God. We would do well to emulate Elijah in our struggles when things get rough. As you continue your struggle, when the going gets rough, I encourage you to follow the advice of our elders and hold on to God's unchanging hand. Build your hope on things eternal. Hold on to God's unchanging hand. I know it's not easy, but like Elijah, God's got some work for you to do. And as you are trying to make your way through your present situation, waiting for your breakthrough, there are angels all around. We've got to learn to stretch beyond our sadness and look beyond our limitations. For God promised to never leave us or forsake us. So even now, God is right by your side. When the going gets rough, you go to God. God bless you.